I'm going to take you through the system design and the manufacture. I want to start in the system design. Now, everything nowadays seems to be some type of smart device, an IoT or whatever. That just means it has to have wires. Well, if you guys are using some of the CAD tool right now to draw your schematics, or even pneumatics or hydraulics, I would recommend you look into SOLIDWORKS Electrical. SOLIDWORKS Electrical for 2020 has been greatly increased. There's so many enhancements added that we can't even go through them all. This is just kind of the top 10 here. Not 10, but top ones. One of the main ones is custom user rights. So much like PDM, you can customize the rights of all the users. One of the things that I also like is the mass properties for wires and cables. So if you have weight as a very specific thing that you want to look at, you route something in 3D and get the mass of that cable or wire. Staying on the Sparky side of the design process, nowadays what you're going to notice is everything's going to have like a smart circuit board in it. Right? Has anybody designed circuit boards or use circuit boards in your designs? Well, if you didn't know, SOLIDWORKS has a tool called SOLIDWORKS PCB. It's very accurately named. I'm going to jump over here and I'm going to scare every mechanical engineer in the room. I am an electrical engineer and this is a circuit board. But what you're going to notice is all these smart devices require things like this. Now, where the problem lies is the communication between the MCAD or the mechanical team and the ECAD or the electrical team. What's really cool is SOLIDWORKS has gotten rid of that problem. Has anyone ever had to like create it or import a step or an IGES file, you made it together, and then the crazy electrical guy is like, oh, I had to change it. And then you have to re-import, remake, and you're just like, there's gotta be an easier way. Has anyone ever felt that pain before? No one? Fine. You're like, yes, I just don't want to talk about it because it hurts. Well, you don't have to do that anymore. If you notice over on the right-hand side, there's a column there, and you got some like little bubbles. Looks like a text message. It's really similar to a text message because all you got to do is type what you're doing and then push it to what we call the SOLIDWORKS PCB connector. The connector ties together the electrical team and the mechanical team. That way you're communicating with the exact same information. There's no go-between or dumb neutral files anymore. So what I want to look here is this is the interface for SOLIDWORKS PCB. We can really quickly jump to a 3D rendered of this. This looks like CAD from '95. So you guys are probably remember that. We can rotate this thing around, but I want to talk about something that's been added for 2020. First of all, anybody creating data back at work? You're probably creating data, right? And you're probably having to store that somewhere. You're probably storing it in a vault if you're using SOLIDWORKS PDM. With 2020, you can now store all your circuit board designs in the vault as well. There's a PCB PDM connector. Okay. Also for 2020 is the ability to design boards that are flexible. So you'll notice there's some dark spots on this circuit board. We can even visualize that in SOLIDWORKS PCB by folding this board up. Okay, and then we can communicate back and forth with that PCB connector. So if I close out a SOLIDWORKS PCB here, I want to jump over to the SOLIDWORKS. You guys know what SOLIDWORKS is, right? At least I hope so. So you're going to notice that the exact same communication is over here on the right. That SOLIDWORKS PCB connector is available in SOLIDWORKS as an add-in. So the same pieces of communication between the ECAD and the MCAD team are right here. If he makes changes, or he or she makes changes, we can pull them through that connector and they update right here on the screen. Now, one thing that's really cool about that is this is a real SOLIDWORKS model. That means you have every trace could be pulled as a decal, or you could even pull it as a solid body. If you pull it as a solid body, that means you can do thermal analysis on it, figure out if you created a fuse or if you created a connection. So this was something that was introduced last year, is the structure systems. Now, if you want to use weldments to create this weldment that you see on the screen, it could take a ton of time using trimming. Okay, because you're going to create the structure and you're going to have to come back and trim everything. It could be a nightmare. Also, it's not that bad, but it's just time consuming. So let's look at this thing from scratch. I'm going to model that right in front of you guys. Okay. Now, what do you need for a weldment? You probably need a profile, and then you need a sketch line or a path, similar to a sweep. Weldments are automated sweeps. So if we use the structure system, we can say that we want to create primary members. Same thing with weldments. I'm going to choose my exact profile that I want. Once I have that nailed down, I don't have to have sketches anymore. I can just use points. So I don't have to have those lines anywhere. I can say that I want to use points, and then I can choose the points that I want those profiles to go between, and we'll create a chain and go directly from point to point. Now, if I don't want to do that, I can say that I want to go up to a point, and then I can go up to this specific point right there. And you see that those 2 points at the bottom now go up and meet at that one vertex to create a complex angle. Maybe I don't even need that. I want to just go up to a plane. So I'm going to go up to this plane and remove this last one here. That's exactly what I want. Just like in an extrusion, I could change the angle of extrusion with some reference sketch. I want them to go straight up. Perfect. So these are my primary members. Now I'm going to add some secondary members in here. Now look at how easy this is. First of all, when you're in a weldment, you're probably going to have to get out of the weldment command if you want a different weldment profile. Using the structure systems, you can use multiple weldment profiles. So I'm going to change this to a different size in this exact same structure system command. Now, all I have to do is choose my primary members and then choose any planes that I want to add secondary members with. And then I can choose what pierce point I want to line this thing up. I want them to line up so that planes are at the top of that member. So that's really easy to do. And then notice I have all 4 of those where all 4 of those planes were. I want to add another secondary member. Now this time, this is something that's brand new for 2020, is the ability to go between 2 existing members. I can say that I want them to go from the ends of this, but alternating ends. And then if this thing is traversing those 2 middle pieces like what you see here, that can cause a problem whenever you get into trimming. And it's going to be a lot of manual trimming and clicking and rotating of the model. We don't want to be moving our model all around. We want to be efficient. So I'm going to say that I want to break it with those 2 pieces of geometry. So it's going to split the model for us. Another thing I can do is take this profile and rotate it 90 degrees. So that's all 3 of these profiles are different. So they're placed differently, or they're just completely different sizes. Let's go ahead and accept that. Now, the real benefit of using structure systems is when you exit a structure system. So just like with weldments, you can create a very complex weldment, and then you get out and you're like, oh, now I got to spend 20 minutes trimming this thing away. Well, all I have to do is exit, and then I have 3 tabs here. The simple tab is where it's just basically really simple trimming operations. I'm going to do a full contact planar trim here. Same thing for my 2-member trim operations. And then we have a complex tab. And these complex tabs are where 3 or more weldments meet. So you can see an example down here where these 2 yellow members are. Since SOLIDWORKS is pretty smart, it's probably a little smarter than me, I'm going to let it figure it out for all the complex corners. I can hit my green check. What you're going to notice is it's made very good decisions and now has manufacturable members. This is really awesome. Anybody excited about that yet? No? Yeah. I saw one, maybe. Maybe we'll get some claps here in a minute. Now, if I needed a circular pattern of this, I can launch a circular pattern, no big deal. But I don't want to have to click every single body because these are all separate bodies because we're in a weldment. So I'm going to choose bodies, but you're going to notice that there's now this box here for structure systems. So I can say anywhere on this structure system and do a circular pattern. What I don't want to have to do is create a bunch of sketches or mirror a bunch of bodies. So now we have these 12 individual units that we patterned around that single axis. I am not limited to single structure systems inside of parts. I can launch a brand new structure system consisting only of secondary members. And this time I'm going to choose these 4 members here. And then I want to break them with those same 4 planes. And again, I want to line it up with my pierce point so that I'm lined up with the top of my planes. You're going to notice, again, when I exit this structure system, it's going to ask me how I want to trim this. This time, I want to trim this with body trims for both the simple and the 2-member. Again, for the complex, SOLIDWORKS is a pretty smart program. I'm going to let it figure it out for me. So now I have a brand new structure system. And to tie all this together, all I have to do is launch another circular pattern around the same axis with that same structure system option. You're going to notice all these were tied together. Does anyone want to create all those sketches, especially if it's a 3D sketch? because you've never had a 3D sketch just go, right? That's a thing. There's no way to describe it, but it's a thing. So very, very quickly, I can create a lot of geometry using the structure systems. Now, we've kind of looked at patterns here at the end of the structure system, but I want to talk way more about patterns. Patterns in 2020 have been greatly enhanced. So the first thing I want to look at on patterns is this carriage assembly. You're going to notice that I have this socket head cap screw in here. Now, I want to take that and I want to pattern it anywhere where there's a hole. We call that a pattern-driven feature pattern. Or has anyone ever used that one? Pattern-driven component pattern. It's kind of a mouthful, but it basically just says, put that screw wherever I have holes, right? That's the SOLIDWORKS translation there. So that screw, and then the feature that I want to use to pattern it is going to be that feature. Now, instead of screws floating out here, I want to select my seed position, which is exactly where this screw is. But what's brand new for 2020, and because all that you could do prior to 20, but now you're going to notice that it understands the direction of Hole Wizard holes. So you see the screws back here, these previews, they are in the socket head cap screw hole in the appropriate direction. So align to seed is the old way, and in 2020 I can now align to holes, hit my green check mark, and I don't have to do it a couple times. Super efficient. No one? Yay! Super awesome. All right, another thing I want to talk about on patterns is this end cap. So this end cap has a circular pattern and it has a single hole in it already. So choosing this axis and then launching a circular pattern, I can very easily choose that component to pattern. Maybe I want 8 of these. Now you're going to notice that this pattern is not perfectly symmetrical. So prior to 2020, you might have had to either create multiple patterns or you have to do a lot of crazy workarounds to get this thing to line up perfectly. You're going to notice that there's a new box here called Modified Instances. Click on one of these and I can modify this instance and change it from 45 to 40 degrees so it is perfectly lined up. I can choose this one as well. I'm going to modify its instance and I want that to be 275, so those are both 5 degrees off. Maybe you don't want this thing, maybe it's directional and it's not perfectly symmetrical, and that's exactly what we want. You can now do that with a single circular pattern without having to do any crazy workarounds. So what that means is you're going to be way more efficient. You can do things with a single feature rather than a whole bunch of features. Sticking on patterns, one thing that we forget that's really called a pattern is a mirror. So if I want to take this end cap assembly and this right plane, and I want it on the other side, I can launch a mirror components. And you're going to notice that in prior years, we had center of bounding box and center of mass. But with 2020, we now have the option to mirror about the component origin, which in a lot of cases is really going to get exactly what you need, especially if you have symmetrical parts. You're also going to notice that instead of cycling through each one of the mirroring options, we now have individual buttons to show what that mirror option will look like, and a really great preview so that there's no ifs, ands, or buts about what exactly you're going to get. So that's exactly what I want to get there. So as you notice, the assembly patterns are now way easier to create and more flexible in their control. But probably the most important thing in assemblies are the mates. Has anyone ever made anything together, right? They're like, yeah, obviously, duh, that's why we're here. So I like to be super efficient with mating. Now, some people might call it lazy. I'm going to call it efficient. I like my mouse to be the most efficient mouse. I don't want it to move. If I could sit here and not move and drive SOLIDWORKS, I would. I want it to be the Tesla of mice. I don't want to have a diesel truck mouse, okay? So hey, take offense to that. I love diesel trucks, but I want my mouse to be the most efficient thing. I like to use the quick mates. I don't like to go into the mate command at all. I don't like to go up there and click on Clippy and then tell them what we're doing and then go ahead and mate it out. I want to use control. Has anyone ever used the control mate? You click something, hold control, click another one? Doug says yes. Absolutely, all the time. It's amazing. Now, not every mate was supported, but what you're going to notice here is I can choose that face, hold control, click that slot, and then now I have the slot mate available on the quick mate toolbar. You're also going to notice that I have a constraint for each one of those mate types that we can create on this quick mate toolbar. Maybe I want to center in the slot and then hit my green check. So that's another mate that we can use on the Quick Mate toolbar. Now, a couple of years ago, we added profile center mate, which takes two geometrical shapes, finds their center, and lines them up, and they can pivot around each other. So with this screw, I can choose that bottom face, because that's a geometrical shape, and the top side of this washer, and I can make a profile center mate, which is going to line it up, similar to a coincident and a concentric. Well, as soon as I accept it, I have the option to flip its direction. So I can just really quickly click that flip mate direction. I don't have to go find the mate in the tree. I can just flip it upon creation. It's amazing. It's going to save you time. No one got excited about that one? When I first saw that one, I was like, but wait, there's more. Bad jokes. Just prepare yourself. So a couple years ago, they added the width mate on the Quick Mate toolbar. And it didn't matter which order you chose your four faces. So I can choose that face, I can choose that face, rotate it around, choose the bottom side of this pin and then the bottom side of that washer. And then when I let go of control, if you're not a mouse wiggler, right? If you're a mouse wiggler, SOLIDWORKS is going to punish you. This thing's going to go away. Called the context toolbar. I can choose that Quick Mate of width, and as soon as I place it, again the constraints pop up. Maybe I want this centered, which is probably what most people are going to want with a width. But again, if I don't wiggle my mouse, I have a flip mate alignment, even for a width mate. So I can flip it right now. I don't have to suppress it, rotate the model, unsuppress it. There's a lot of crazy workarounds you might have had to do. No longer with SOLIDWORKS 2020. Choosing this face and this face, I probably need a concentric mate. You're going to notice when I accept that one, I have the lock rotation and flip mate alignment. So if you want screws that are in a hole and don't have to, and they can't rotate, so you don't have to go find that in the tree anymore, you can just make it say lock rotation. Perfect. Now, another thing that I might need to do is have this thing pivot and show the true angle or true limit that it can go through on this hinge. Well, this hinge right now, I can't move it. So I need to make this thing flexible, first of all, so we can actually see what's going on. You're going to notice that SOLIDWORKS is like, yeah, you can do that. You found the unobtainium and it can go through that model. But we need to tell SOLIDWORKS that it really can't do that. So I'm going to choose that face. Again, using the Quick Mates option, choosing that face, letting go of control, you're going to see that there's now an option for limit angle. So limit angle and limit distance also are available on the Quick Mate toolbar. So choosing that, I want it to be at 45. I want its maximum here to be at 90. And its minimum to be at 0. So this is a true range of motion that we're placing in our angle. So now SOLIDWORKS says you don't have the unobtainium anymore. It now can no longer go through itself. Perfect. So a ton of mates have been added to the Quick Mate toolbar. Anybody excited about that? I know I am. It's gonna save me time. Tesla of mice. Now, working on complex assemblies, it can be very difficult, especially if you have multiple engineers inside of one top-level assembly. So prior to 2020, a lot of crazy workarounds might have had to been done here. You might have to take a component that you were needing to reference inside of a sub-assembly and then add it in other sub-assemblies just so that you can reference it. But the problem with that is it changed your center of mass. It changed the weight of that sub-assembly. You duplicated your parts in a bill of material. There's a bunch of ramifications to duplicating parts in an assembly. Well, in SOLIDWORKS 2020, we have this ability to launch what's called the envelope publisher. Now this envelope publisher says, what component do you want to put in this envelope? Well, this arm back here, you're going to notice is way out of place. That arm, I want to mate up to this component right here. Well, I want to make that mate at the sub-assembly level. I don't want that mate to be at the top level assembly. So I'm going to say, hey, I want that part, and the destination assembly I want is going to be that arm assembly. Hitting my green check mark, you're going to see it's going to think for a second and go, I got it. Now, nothing looks like it's changed. But if we jump into that sub-assembly, you're going to notice that we have an enveloped component. It is shown as this blue and transparent component. This enveloped component is now at the sub-assembly level. Okay? It does not affect center of mass. It does not affect weight. It does not affect your bill of material. It is here solely for reference. But what's really cool about this is I can mate to this. So I can say I want that edge, and then I want the edge of this arm, and I want to use a profile center mate to line them up and accept it. So now this thing is in perfect position in the sub-assembly level, mated to a component that's not even in the sub-assembly. So by jumping back to my top level assembly, you're going to notice that this arm is placed perfectly in position. Now, wherever that component moves at the top level, that reference is going to push down with that envelope. That one is huge, especially if you're working with multiple engineers in the top level assembly. So it's going to make it simple to work collaboratively in large assemblies and make sure that your designs will fit together seamlessly the first time. So let's close out here. Now, another thing that is new for 2020 was something that was originally introduced in 2019 as a beta feature, and that's eDrawings. In eDrawings Professional, it now supports virtual reality. So if you guys have an HTC Vive or one of those VR headsets like what you see out there with Beat Saber, you can jump directly into your model. All you have to do is put on one of those headsets and then jump in your design. It's really that easy. Just hit File and then open in VR or virtual reality. And it's been greatly improved in 2020 as well, with support for transparency, full scene anti-aliasing, and ambient occlusion. Basically, those big words just mean that model looks really, really great. So there's more options to control the sky and the floor. So if you want your concrete to look like concrete instead of tiles, you can also blend where the ground and the sky meet. Any transparent components like this glass, you can look straight through it, and it just full immersion in your model. So maybe you want your customers to come on site, throw on an HTC Vive, and go through their designs as an approval step. It's something that would be really great, and it's just a really good plus